I was halfway through my morning coffee, enjoying the peaceful hum of the countryside, when I heard the unmistakable roar of my tractor's engine. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't touched it that morning. No one else was supposed to be using it. Yet, there it was, rolling across my farm with a cloud of dust trailing behind it. At first, I thought maybe one of my farmhands had decided to take it for a spin without telling me. But then I saw her, Karen, perched high in the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other holding her phone out like she was hosting a live TV show. I jumped to my feet, nearly spilling my coffee as I bolted toward the field. She was moving fast, heading straight toward my freshly plowed land, but what really caught my attention was the wagon hitched to the back of my tractor. Packed inside were about a dozen people, city folks dressed in bright colors, oversized sunglasses and floppy sun hat. They looked like tourists on a hayride, except there was no hay. Just a bunch of confused, somewhat terrified-looking people gripping the sides of the wagon as Karen hit every bump with reckless enthusiasm. "Welcome to my exclusive farm tour, everyone." Karen's voice rang out, way too excited for someone who had just stolen my tractor. "Today we're gonna experience real farm life. Get ready for a ride you'll never forget." She wasn't wrong about that last part. I ran as fast as I could, waving my arms and shouting, but she wasn't paying any attention to me. She was too busy filming herself, turning the camera around to show the passengers, who were already looking uneasy as the wagon rocked violently behind the tractor. One woman clutched her designer purse like it might save her life. A man in a Hawaiian shirt was muttering something about getting a refund. "Karen!" I shouted at the top of my lungs. "Stop the tractor!" She turned her head slightly, barely acknowledging me before giving a dismissive wave. "Oh hey, farmer guy! Don't worry, I got this." Then, into her phone, she added, "Looks like the farm owner is just super excited to see us." I wasn't excited. I was furious. I sprinted after the tractor, cutting across the field, hoping to intercept her before she could do any real damage. She had no idea what she was doing. My tractor wasn't just some joyride attraction. It was expensive, powerful, and not meant to be driven by someone who thought farm life was just a quirky Instagram aesthetic. Before I could reach her, she took a sharp turn toward the pig pen, where my pigs were happily wallowing in the mud. The wagon wobbled dangerously, and a few of the passengers yelped as they were jostled from side to side. One guy nearly fell out but managed to grab the edge at the last second. Karen, completely oblivious to the chaos, kept talking into her phone. "For just $10 you can feed the adorable farm animals. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, people." I finally caught up as she slowed near the pig pen, taking the chance to grab onto the side of the tractor. "Karen, get off my tractor. Now." She turned to me with an exaggerated sigh, as if I was the one causing trouble. "Relax, will you? I'm just giving people a taste of the simple life. You should be thanking me for bringing attention to your little farm." "My little farm doesn't need attention," I snapped. "It needs you to get off my property before you get yourself, and everyone else, hurt." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh please. I know what I'm doing." She did not, in fact, know what she was doing. Before I could stop her, she revved the engine and took off again, heading straight toward the lower part of my field. My stomach dropped. That area had just been watered. The soil was soft, turning into thick mud beneath the surface. "Karen, stop. That's a mud pit." But she was too busy playing the role of an influencer to listen. "Oh my gosh, guys," she gushed into her phone. "This is the ultimate farm experience. Real dirt, real adventure. Who's ready for some action?" The moment her front wheels hit the mud, the tractor lurched. The back wheels spun wildly, kicking up a spray of brown sludge. The passengers in the wagon screamed as the entire thing rocked violently. Karen, realizing too late that she had lost control, shrieked, "Oh!" The tractor sank fast. The front wheels disappeared into the thick, unforgiving muck. The back end followed, the weight of the wagon pulling it down. The passengers had enough sense to jump off before they could get dragged in, but some weren't lucky enough to escape the flying mud. One woman let out a horrified gasp as a chunk of wet earth splattered across her expensive blouse. The Hawaiian shirt guy groaned, "This is not what I paid for." Karen frantically pressed buttons and yanked the steering wheel, but nothing happened. The tractor was stuck, deep, and getting deeper by the second. I crossed my arms and took a deep breath, fighting the urge to let out the loudest laugh of my life. Karen, the self-proclaimed farm expert, had just buried my tractor in a pit of mud. "Okay," she said, her voice unnervingly high-pitched. "No big deal. I got this." She slammed her foot on the gas. Big mistake. The tires spun uselessly, spraying more mud into the air. One particularly nasty chunk flew straight into Karen's face. She gasped, frozen in shock, before letting out a dramatic wail. "My hair! My makeup! This is a disaster." The passengers, now thoroughly annoyed, started pulling out their phones, not for selfies but to record the catastrophe. A few of them were already laughing, shaking their heads as Karen wiped at the mud streaking down her cheeks. "This is the worst tour I've ever been on," someone muttered. Karen, still frantically trying to save herself, turned to me with wide, desperate eyes. "Fix it. Get it out of the mud." I shook my head, suppressing a grin. "Oh no, you seemed pretty confident in your farm skills a minute ago. Why don't you handle it?" Her nostrils flared. "I don't have time for this. I have a brand to maintain." "You're about to have a brand new reputation," I said, nodding toward the phones still recording her every move. Her face paled. "Wait, are they posting this?" "Oh yeah," I said. "And I have a feeling it's gonna be a hit." Karen let out a dramatic groan and threw her hands up. "This is a nightmare." I smirked. "Welcome to real farm life." Karen sat frozen in the driver's seat, her hands still gripping the steering wheel like she could will the tractor out of the mud through sheer determination. The reality of her situation was sinking in, and for once, she wasn't talking. She was covered in mud, her designer blouse stained beyond repair, her perfectly styled hair now a stringy mess of dirt and sweat. But what really got to her wasn't the state of her clothes or hair, it was the dozen cameras pointed in her direction. The tourists she had so confidently led on this ridiculous farm tour were now recording her downfall, their smirks and quiet chuckles making it clear that they were enjoying every second of her humiliation. Karen blinked, then forced a bright, nervous laugh. "Okay, everyone, small hiccup. Just a little farm authenticity for ya. We're just experiencing a real-life farming challenge." She waved dramatically, still trying to act as if this was all part of some grand plan, but her voice was shaking, and she wasn't fooling anyone. One of the tourists, a woman in a bright yellow sundress, who had up until now been clinging to the side of the wagon for dear life, scoffed. "This isn't a challenge. It's a disaster." The man in the Hawaiian shirt, who was still picking mud off his khaki shorts, crossed his arms. "You charged us $50 for this. Where's the part where we actually learn something about farming? Or, I don't know, see some baby animals? That's what your website said." Karen stiffened, her carefully rehearsed influencer smile cracking just a little more. Well, the thing about farm life is that it's unpredictable. You never know what's gonna happen." She shot me a glare, as if I had personally arranged for her to sink my tractor into the mud just to spite her. I leaned against the wooden fence, watching with quiet amusement as the situation unraveled. "You know, Karen, you could have avoided all this if you'd just asked for permission instead of stealing my tractor." Karen scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. I didn't steal it, I borrowed it. For educational purposes." "Educational purposes?" I repeated. "What exactly are these people learning? How to get stuck in a mud pit? Because if that's the lesson, you're doing a great job." One of the tourists, a middle-aged woman with an expensive-looking handbag now splattered in mud, sighed loudly. "I just want to know how we're getting out of here. I'm not spending the rest of my afternoon watching her pretend she knows what she's doing. Karen turned back to the stuck tractor, then squared her shoulders as if she had made some sort of important decision. All right, everyone, no need to panic. I can handle this. She adjusted her grip on the wheel and, without another word, stomped her foot on the gas. A deafening roar filled the air as the tractor's engine protested against the force. The back wheels spun wildly, digging deeper into the mud, spraying thick, wet clumps in every direction. The tourists screamed, ducking and shielding their faces as flying mud splattered across their clothes. A particularly large glob smacked against Karen's cheek, sliding down onto her already ruined blouse. Karen let out a strangled cry. Oh my God! This is not happening. I barely managed to dodge a fresh wave of mud as I took a few steps back, shaking my head. That's not how you get a tractor unstuck, Karen. Karen was too busy flailing in horror at her now completely destroyed outfit to listen. She whipped around, pointing an accusing finger at me. This is your fault. I laughed. How exactly is this my fault? You're the one who drove straight into a mud pit. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling to come up with an excuse. Eventually, she settled for crossing her arms and huffing. Well, you should have put up a sign or something. How was I supposed to know? One of the tourists groaned. Maybe because the ground was obviously wet and sinking? Karen ignored them and turned back to the tractor, her face determined. Fine. If brute force doesn't work, we'll try something else. She jumped down from the driver's seat, landing with a loud squelch as her expensive sneakers sank into the mud up to her ankles. Her eyes went wide with horror. Ew. Ew. She lifted one foot, then the other, but with each movement she only got more stuck. The tourists, at this point, had given up on any hope that this was a professional operation. Instead, they were full-on laughing. A man pulled out his phone and grinned. I think I just found my new favorite video. Karen, struggling to free herself from the mud, turned sharply. Hey! Don't film this. The woman in the yellow sundress snorted. Oh, so you can record everything for your followers, but we can't? Karen sputtered. That's different. I'm a professional. I let out a slow whistle, watching the scene unfold. Looks like your exclusive farm tour is turning into a viral moment. Karen shot me a glare. This is not funny. Oh, it's a little funny. She let out a growl of frustration, then turned back to me, her face desperate. Okay, fine. Just get the tractor out and I'll give you a shout-out on my channel. I raised an eyebrow. A shout-out? Oh wow, what an honor. Karen clenched her fist. What do you want, then? I tapped my chin, pretending to think about it. Well, since you seem to love farm life so much, how about this? You help out on the farm for a day, and I'll get your tractor out. Karen's expression twisted like I had just asked her to walk barefoot over hot coals. Absolutely not. I shrugged. Suit yourself. That tractor's not going anywhere without my help. She let out a dramatic groan, looking back at the tractor like it might magically free itself just to save her from doing actual work. But the tourists were now getting impatient, and more than a few of them were already making their way back toward the dirt road that led to the main road, shaking their heads in disappointment. Ugh. Fine. Karen threw up her hands. But I am not cleaning any animal poop. I grinned. We'll see. She glared at me one last time, then stomped off toward the farm, still struggling to free her feet from the thick mud. The remaining tourists, now completely uninterested in her influencer nonsense, began dispersing, muttering about refunds and leaving behind a very different kind of review than Karen had expected. As I watched her slosh away in defeat, I leaned against the fence again, shaking my head with a smirk. This was going to be fun. Karen stomped toward the barn, her sneakers squelching with each step, splattering more mud onto her already ruined outfit. Her once pristine white blouse was now a patchy mess of brown and green, her hair clumped together in sticky strands, and her face was a mix of frustration and disbelief. The tourists had mostly dispersed, leaving behind a few stragglers still laughing as they checked their phones. No doubt, her farm tour disaster was already making its way onto social media. I followed behind her at a leisurely pace, taking my time as she struggled to maintain whatever dignity she had left. Every few steps, she muttered something under her breath, likely blaming me, the mud, the tractor, and possibly the entire concept of farming for her predicament. When we reached the barn, she whirled around to face me, arms crossed, her entire body still dripping in filth. "All right, let's get this over with," she snapped. "What do I have to do?" I pretended to think about it for a moment, rubbing my chin as I looked her up and down. "Well, since you're so interested in real farm life, how about we start with something simple? Feeding the animals." Karen let out a loud, dramatic sigh but followed me as I led her to the feed storage. I handed her a bucket filled with grain and pointed toward the chicken coop. "Just sprinkle this around. They'll do the rest." She grabbed the bucket, walked over to the fence, and hesitantly tossed some feed onto the ground. Immediately, the chickens swarmed, flapping and pecking at the grain. Karen took a step back, eyes wide. "Oh my God, they're like little dinosaurs." I chuckled. "That's pretty accurate." One particularly bold hen, seeing the feed bucket still in Karen's hand, hopped up onto the fence and then onto Karen's arm. She let out a high-pitched shriek, flailing so hard that the rest of the grain went flying into the air. The chickens, seeing an unexpected feast, lunged for it, and Karen bolted away, tripping over a pile of straw and landing flat on her back. I covered my mouth, trying to hold back a laugh. "You okay there, farm girl?" Karen shot me a murderous glare as she sat up, her hands now covered in straw and dirt. "This is humiliating." "You wanted authenticity," I reminded her. "Besides, this is the easiest part of the job." She groaned, pushing herself to her feet. "Fine. What's next?" I led her toward the goat pen, where my two mischievous goats, Buster and Clyde, were already eyeing us with interest. Goats need their hooves checked and trimmed. "Think you're up for it?" Karen hesitated, eyeing the animals warily. "They won't bite me, will they?" "Not if you do it right." She didn't look convinced, but after a deep breath, she knelt beside Buster and reached for his hoof. The moment she touched it, Buster yanked his leg back and licked the side of her face. Karen screamed, falling backward again, while I doubled over in laughter. "He licked me!" she shrieked, wiping her face furiously. "That means he likes you," I said, still laughing. "I do not like him back." After another failed attempt to complete the task, I decided it was best not to push my luck. I pointed toward the pig pen, where the real work needed to be done. "All right, final job. The pigsty needs a good cleaning." Karen's entire body tensed. "No. That wasn't a question," I said, handing her a shovel. Her jaw clenched as she took the tool from me. She muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a curse under her breath, but stomped toward the pigpen. The moment she stepped inside, she gagged. "Oh my God, this is worse than the mud." I leaned against the fence, watching in amusement as she started half-heartedly scooping up the mess, holding the shovel as far away from herself as possible. The pigs, curious about their new visitor, nudged her legs as they sniffed at her. "Get away from me," she whined, trying to shoo them off. The pigs, naturally, took that as an invitation to play. One of them nudged her harder, causing her to lose her balance and land straight into a pile of, well, exactly what she was supposed to be cleaning. Her scream echoed across the farm. I let out a low whistle. "You okay there, Karen?" She sat up, horror and disgust written all over her face. "I hate you." I grinned. "Nah, you hate farming." After another 10 minutes of suffering, Karen had finally had enough. She stormed toward me, dropping the shovel at my feet. "I'm done. You win. Just get your stupid tractor out of the mud." I took my time, walking toward my second tractor, the one she hadn't stolen. I hooked up the chains, positioned myself, and within minutes, my stuck tractor was free. Karen watched, her mouth falling open. "You mean to tell me you could have done that the whole time?" I smirked. Yup. Her face turned bright red. I hate you. I patted the tractor. Well, now you'll never forget that farm life isn't as easy as it looks. Before Karen could respond, the sound of a car pulling up caught our attention. A familiar voice called out, "What in the world is going on here?" I turned to see Sheriff Don stepping out of his patrol car, his sharp eyes scanning the muddy field, the frustrated tourists still lingering, and Karen looking like she had barely survived a natural disaster. I gestured toward her. Karen here decided to borrow my tractor for a little farm tour. Sheriff Don sighed, shaking his head. Karen, what did I tell you about trespassing? Karen crossed her arms, pouting. It wasn't trespassing. I was offering a cultural experience. Sheriff Don pulled out his notepad. Did Jim give you permission? Karen's silence was answer enough. The sheriff scribbled something down, then looked at me. You want to press charges? I considered it for a moment, watching as Karen shifted uncomfortably. But the truth was, she had already gotten the best punishment I could have imagined. Her influencer reputation was in shambles, her clothes were ruined, and her tour had become a viral joke. I shook my head. Nah. I think she's learned her lesson. Karen perked up. Really? I grinned. Yep. But if I ever catch you on my farm again without permission, I won't be so nice. Sheriff Don sighed, tucking his notepad away. All right, Karen, you're lucky today. Get cleaned up and go home. Karen didn't need to be told twice. She stomped toward her car, muttering the entire way. As she drove off, one of the tourists walked up to me. You know, despite the disaster, this was the most entertaining thing I've ever seen. If you ever decide to offer real farm tours, let me know. I chuckled. I'll think about it. As the last of the tourists left, I leaned against my freshly recovered tractor, taking in the peaceful farm that was finally back under my control. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden glow over the fields. Despite the chaos of the day, one thing was for certain: Karen wouldn't be back anytime soon. And that, to me, was a perfect ending.